Thanks for spending the time with us, producer Jason Bloom.
How are you? Nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
Dude, you like rocked the house here at WonderCon. Everyone was excited. Do you want to talk about a little bit about what you presented in obvious Insidious Chapter 3? Unfriended, that looks like awesome. What else did you do?
So we presented 2 original movies and 2 sequels to franchises we have. The originals is a movie called The Gallows and a movie called Unfriended, which are both very, very low budget, very unique, and ultra scary movies. And then we have 2 franchises, Insidious 3 and Sinister 2, which people are more familiar with, and they're the next installments in both of those franchises.
So, what is it about like found footage that people are so like freaked out about?
I think found footage, it works particularly well for scary because it feels real. So people think they're looking at, if people are your suspension of disbelief. You think you're looking at real footage, and then suddenly these terrible things happen, and it feels that much more visceral, that much more scary.
And also the obsession with social media. Was that something you were like really happy about, like using that as a kind of like a way to tell a story?
Well, I think social media, people love it, but people are also scared of it, and people have secrets, and they try and pull information off it, and they don't really trust it, and people keep their kids away from it. So I think it's one of the things that lives in our home and on our bodies, in our pockets all the time. So I think it is very, very frightening, and this movie, Unfriended, is really about how frightening it can actually be, and that taps into a kind of fear that we all have.
Speaking of frightening, Insidious Chapter 3 looks terrifying. Could you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, I can't wait for that one.
So Chapter 3, Insidious Chapter 3 is a prequel. It takes place before 1 and 2, and what it does we meet a new family. We have Lynn and Angus and Specs and Tucker are back, Angus and Lee. But what it really does is kind of explain how Lynn and Specs and Tucker got together, and how that relationship started, and how they got into the business that they're in, and a lot of the relationships that are in the first and second movies get kind of explained and talked about in the third movie.
So should we expect a Chapter 4 coming?
I hope so. I hope we get to make a Chapter 4. I definitely have an idea for it. I don't know.
Could you tell us? We need the views.
I cannot tell you.
You know what it is. You could tell us.
I have an idea, but I don't know if that's what's going to be Chapter 4. But I hope we get to make it, and I hope it's the idea that we have.
I give full credit to James and what he did with the first 2 movies, because he's built this base. There's a great fan base for Insidious. All I hope I can do is live up to that fan base. That's my main task, is keeping the fans of the Insidious films happy, and horror fans in general, but especially the Insidious fans specifically.
Now, this is a sort of a prequel?
Yeah, it is. I really wanted to go back a little bit and meet Lynn's character, who's standing right over there, when she was still alive. I mean, I don't think it's a spoiler at this point to say that we killed her off in the first movie. And it's a real problem, because in the second film, she was essentially a ghost. And I really wanted to deal with her as a human. I think Lynn is such a great actress, and as you know, she's such a quirky person in real life. You want her alive. You don't want ghost version of her in the white nightgown, like, hello. You want her bouncing off the walls. So if you do that, you got to go back in time. And I really think it's a fun origin story for her.
What is it about horror films that people just love, in your opinion?
I think horror films tap into places of fear that we all have, and there's something kind of wonderful about going into a dark theater with a lot of strangers and experiencing sometimes your deepest fears in a safe place. And it's cathartic. I mean, that you're safe. You walk out and it's either light, or you can go get a drink, or you can go eat a pizza, or you can go home with your girlfriend or your family, and yet have been put through some of these primal feelings and fears that we all have. And that's why I think they'll always forever be a part of the entertainment fabric, because they're a part of the human fabric.
I watched the whole screener with the lights on, and I was still scared. So I'm sure people in the theater, bring your friends and family, because it's going to be a great time.
How real are the scares? I mean, was it scary to film? I mean, some of those sets look...
Well, Stephanie did a lot of her own stunts, and the whole set, was dark and cold, and we all were going through this experience together, and I think that really helped bring in the organic fear in this film.
You'll play Sean Brenner in Insidious 3.
Tell us a little bit about that character.
Oh, you know what? It's a cool character because I think, especially for your typical horror movie, is really this movie's got a lot of heart, and you'll find it in the family story. Also, you have a family that starts out kind of in bad shape, so we go from kind of bad to really bad. Whereas normally they'd have you kind of like a happy family, and then things go wrong. What we have is something really relatable where we're struggling through the loss of my wife and the lead character's mother. And she winds up reaching across to the other world and bringing back someone who says that she's the mother, and she gets possessed. And by which I mean, not like haunted or just scared or made anxious or how am I going to get out of this situation. I mean full on like crazy possessed. So this film is great in a number of ways, but for me I like it. It has shades of like the great psychological horror movies, whether it's The Exorcist or The Shining, movies like that. And it has less to do with slasher films we know from the other Insidious movies that it's very psychological horror. And in this, he just takes it to the nth degree. It's really good.
What's the message behind the film besides scaring the hell out of you?
Well, what I think people will find is that they can relate to the horror because the director's also given the bad guy or the villain a very understandable character.
It's probably the same thing that attracts me to it, this inherent fascination with what is out there, what is going on. I really enjoy how the pacing of these films. I really enjoy the domesticity of these films. With Patrick Wilson and Rose Byrne's performances in the first two chapters, it really elevated, I felt, just a bunch of pretty people screaming at a cat running across a hallway. Lee and James were really hoping to make these character-driven scares, and hopefully we're still doing that. Certainly for me to be revisiting The Further for the third time, this film is far scarier than the second one. I know that. This is very... at the time, everything's so crazy busy when you're filming it, but when you watch it back, it's so well paced, quiet, still. Stephanie and Dermot, who play daughter and father, very normal story of a family dealing with loss. We're not asking you to imagine what it's like to have dinosaurs come alive, which I love dinosaurs as well. But anyway, so for us, this is an origin story as opposed to a prequel. It's how does Lynn Shay's character Elise meet Lee Winnell and my character Specs and Tucker? How do we get involved with the Lambert family, who are the focus of Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, and also possibly where to from here. So yeah, it was great fun. Lee was directing his first feature film for the first time, which is an incredible achievement. To write, direct, produce, act, and to do it in 5 weeks is amazing.
It's a love-hate relationship. It's the thrill. It's being on the edge of your seats and not knowing what's going to happen and being surprised each time. But what's so great about Insidious is it really pulls you into the family, and you really fight for the characters and feel for them on an emotional level, especially with her having just lost her mom. Everybody knows loss and that awful feeling. And so I think that's what's so great about Insidious is it brings you in to the family life, but it's equally, or if not more, terrifying.
Some of the